The InVasion storyline was a pivotal moment in the history of professional wrestling. We had WWE, WCW, and ECW converged in an epic battle for supremacy. And at the heart of this monumental saga was none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin, whose electrifying presence and complex character added an extra layer of intensity to this narrative. And in my opinion, this is when Stone Cold ultimately became the greatest wrestler of all time. So picture this, it's July 16th, 2001. The InVasion pay-per-view is this weekend, and WWE arguably put on their best episode of Raw ever, as we the viewers watch on for the next 2 hours to see if Stone Cold would lead WWE against their biggest rivals WCW and ECW. But we should note that there's 2 important storylines going on in WWE at the time, which led to this historic episode of Raw.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
One being the InVasion storyline, and the other was of a broken down Stone Cold that had lost his way within the company. So join us as we look back at one of the most iconic Raws in WWE history. By the time we got to 2001, WCW was in shambles. The company was losing the Monday Night Wars against WWE in both ratings and revenue. And since it was going out of business, Vince capitalized at the right time by purchasing the trademark and the video library of WCW, thus officially ending the Monday Night Wars and coming out victorious. However, this is where one of the greatest stories in WWE history begins. As a result of the purchase, on March 26, 2001, Vince came out to the ring to a hostile audience on that night's episode of Raw, where he demanded that the crowd show him some respect as he's the proud owner of both WCW and WWE, otherwise he would leave the show for good. But in a now infamous moment, Shane's theme song and his face turned up on the Titantron, shocking everybody within the audience. Shane revealed that he will be running WCW in his vision moving forward, but more importantly, he told the world that McMahon does own WCW, but it wasn't Vince McMahon, but none other than Shane McMahon.
Because Dad, the deal is finalized with WCW, and the name on the contract does say McMahon. However, the contract reads Shane McMahon. Oh my God!
Now, whilst this nuke was dropped, on the other side of the coin, ECW was also experiencing financial troubles back in 2001, and WWE once again used this to their advantage by bringing in Paul Heyman and several other ECW guys such as Rhino, Tommy Dreamer, and RVD. And Paul Heyman knew that ECW was never going to get another national television contract, so he thought it would be better if he and several other ECW stars jumped ship. So that meant the perfect scenario was created for Vince. He not only became the #1 wrestling show, beating out his biggest rival, but he also managed to pick up the only other promotion that could give him trouble.
Excellent. Everything is going as planned.
On the flip side of things, in 2001, Stone Cold underwent a notable shift in his character's portrayal, becoming more comedic in compared to his earlier, more aggressive persona. And this was evident from all the backstage segments he was doing, his most iconic one being him singing to Vince to cheer him up.
Here's a little number my dad used to sing to me.
No.
And it always worked every time.
Oh, Captain Lady, sing your song, doo-dah, doo-dah. Come on, Deborah, Captain Lady, sing your song, oh, doo-dah-dee.
But one key reason for this change was the evolving landscape of WWE's storyline. The company was transitioning from an edgy and intense attitude era to the ruthless aggression era. However, there was one issue. They needed to keep their audience engaged during this transition. Therefore, WWE introduced more humor and lightheartedness into their shows, leading to a shift in Stone Cold's character as well. And it's important to mention, during this time, Stone Cold was grappling with several genuine injuries that affected his in-ring performance. So to accommodate for these physical limitations and reduce the strain on his body, WWE opted to reduce his in-ring appearances and incorporate more comedic elements into his character, allowing him to entertain the fans in a less physically demanding way. And if any feud can sum it up, it would be the one with Kurt Angle, where you could see them both let loose. And on July the 5th, 2001 edition of SmackDown, we got comedy gold between the two.
What's wrong? Well, you got Vince a gift. You even got yourself a gift. You didn't get me a big gift.
I got you something, you little rascal.
You did?
Yeah, I didn't forget about you.
Oh, man, this is great.
Sit down, open it up.
A few moments later.
Hey, guys, how's this look?
Boy, if you don't get your squiggly diggly head.
And it would be a crime if I didn't mention the hilarious moment between Austin, Vince, and The Undertaker in the build-up to the InVasion pay-per-view. In the segment, Steve can be seen trolling The Undertaker, and in doing so, trying to get him to break character. They even talked about it years later on their podcast and how it almost worked.
Kane.
Kane.
Undertaker, we do have a deal.
We got a deal.
And Stone Cold, breathing down our necks.
Breathing down our necks. They're breathing it.
You do that again, you're gonna pull back the nerve.
However, I am getting ahead of myself, so let's run it back. When Vince bought WCW, he initially tried to get his own TV slot, but failed to do so as the main TV broadcasters didn't see any value in it. So for months, we didn't hear much about the WCW situation, although we did catch a glimpse of them at WrestleMania 17 when Shane took on his father in a street fight with Mick Foley as the special guest referee. And it wasn't until Raw, May 28th, 2001, when we would see our first WCW star enter a WWE ring. And that individual was Lance Storm. Who? When he interfered in a match between Perry Saturn and Steve Blackman and was later seen in a parking lot greeted by Shane McMahon. And this moment right here had many fans talking. While Lance Storm wasn't the biggest name like Hogan, Scott Hall or Sting, he was a WCW wrestler, which was enough for most of the spectators, as this generated enormous buzz in the wrestling world to get people talking, thus kicking off the InVasion storyline. And because of this, fans started to speculate about all the dream matches that could have been on the card, such as Austin vs Goldberg, Sting vs The Undertaker, and the NWO vs DX. However, those dreams were quickly thrown away, as what we got was mainly mid-carders showing up on Raw and SmackDown. And this was mainly due to the big stars such as Hogan, Scott Hall and Goldberg having guaranteed contracts with Time Warner at the time. And WWE refused to buy out their contracts, so essentially they were getting paid millions while sitting at home. The only notable WCW names were Booker T at King of the Ring when he put Austin through the table, and DDP showing up to feud with The Undertaker. And even then, they weren't really treated as top stars. And this is even more evident when Booker T took on Buff Bagwell on July the 2nd, 2001 edition of Raw. Both men were booed by the fans as their match was received extremely poorly, but it was how Raw ended that night that had many fans questioning the booking of the WCW stars, as towards the end of the match, Austin and Kurt Angle would enter the ring and started to beat on Booker T. And the beatdown would continue all the way through the backstage areas up until the point where Booker T and Buff Bagwell were both thrown out of Monday Night Raw by Stone Cold and Kurt Angle.
Get your ass outside! Do you like that how we did that? Do you like that? Hey, we did that!
Save Austin! They've attacked Buff Bagwell! He's getting the same treatment!
So this whole invasion angle seemed to lack any threat towards the WWE, considering the way everything was being booked. Which is why we need to look at the July 9th episode of Raw, which is another important night that would completely alter the course of the invasion. During the episode, WCW, Lance Storm and Mike Awesome were scheduled to take on Chris Jericho and Kane in a tag team match. And towards the end of the match, when it looked like Jericho and Kane were about to win it, Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer made a run-in to attack the WWE superstars. And this prompted a bunch of WWE wrestlers to run down the ramp to aid Jericho and Kane, such as the Dudley Boys, Taz and Raven. But it didn't take a genius to work out the same WWE guys that came to the ring were all former ECW wrestlers. So in one of the biggest twist moments on Raw, we saw our beloved wrestlers defect to the ECW brand, and all the men in the ring begun beating up on Chris Jericho and Kane. And with Paul Heyman on commentary saying to everybody to remember this moment. But just then, Paul Heyman stood up from the commentary desk, entered the ring, grilled JR and WWE, and then announced that the invasion just wasn't about WCW taking over, but also that Extreme Championship Wrestling had joined the party.
It seems to me like these 6 men have left Vince McMahon's WWF. And it looks to me like they all have joined ECW. So Vince or Shane, anytime you guys want revenge, we'll take on the WWF, because this invasion just got taken to the extreme.
This was truly needed, considering the lack of star power WCW was providing.
Who the fuck are you?
Which meant that they didn't seem like much of a threat. And as a result, this led to a backstage segment during the event where we could see Vince and Shane trying to put their differences aside to take out Paul Heyman and the ECW guys. It would lead to a 10v10 tag team match during the main event where 5 WCW guys and 5 WWE wrestlers will team up to get rid of the invasion of the ECW wrestlers. However, there was a twist. Before the match could even begin, it turned into a brawl between the WCW and WWE wrestlers in the ring.
No fucking fighting!
With the WWE loyalists gaining the upper hand initially in the brawl, what ensued was Paul Heyman and ECW came through the crowd and quickly overwhelmed the WWE wrestlers, throwing them all out of the ring. And we could see Shane McMahon encouraging his wrestlers not to enter the ring up until the point where all the WWE wrestlers were thrown out. Then finally, we could see the ECW wrestlers encouraging the WCW ones to re-enter the ring. But what ended up happening is that when they entered, they started high-fiving and hugging each other.
Hold up. Wait a minute, something ain't right.
And in addition to this, Shane McMahon and Paul Heyman embraced one another, stating that it was all part of the plan and that the two rival factions will be joining hands to form the Alliance, much to Vince's dismay. And to close out the show, it was revealed that Heyman had already sold ECW to Stephanie McMahon, and with Shane in charge of WCW already, the invasion of WWE was starting to look more like a legit threat to Vince and the wrestlers around him.
I am personally responsible for WCW. I am personally responsible for ECW being here tonight. Personally responsible for the merger of WCW and ECW coming together tonight. The new owner of ECW, give it up for Vince's daughter, Stephanie McMahon.
The new owner of WCW!
Now, as I mentioned before, Stone Cold's character in 2001 went through a lot of changes. His heel turn at WrestleMania 17 made it clear that he was best friends with the boss. He also joined forces with Triple H early on that year to form the two-man power trip, and later on became the leader of the new alliance. But in the invasion storyline, with WWE and Vince having their backs against the wall, with both ECW and WCW breathing down their necks, Vince tried to enlist Stone Cold as the leader of Team WWE as he scrambled to try to overcome this massive obstacle to ensure victory at the Invasion pay-per-view. So on the 12th of July edition of SmackDown, Vince came out to the ring to cut a promo on the desperate situation they were in. But when addressing the fans and Austin, Vince made it clear he didn't want the Stone Cold that he saw before him, the one that would give him gifts and sing songs to him, as that version will be too soft. No, what Vince wanted was the old Stone Cold, the one that put him through hell. But during the promo, Stone Cold didn't say anything to Vince. Despite Vince pleading with him, Stone Cold silently walked away, leaving the audience anxious, waiting upon what will happen next.
You know, Stone Cold, the man that I need to lead Team WWF at Invasion, it is not a Stone Cold Steve Austin who gives me hugs. I don't need the Stone Cold Steve Austin that gives me gifts. I don't need the kind of Stone Cold guitar and sings to me. I am the champion, my friend. You know what I need? You know who I need? I need the old Stone Cold. That's the kind of leadership I need from you, Stone Cold. I need you to lead Team WWF into Invasion. I need the old Stone Cold.
So this brings us to July 16th, 2001 edition of Raw, and in my opinion, one of the best go-home shows of Raw ever. The show started pretty normally, with Spike Dudley and Molly Holly confessing their feelings for one another, and before the two could leave the ring, Paul Heyman came out to get Spike to come back to the ECW side, to which Spike refused Paul Heyman's offer. The Dudleys then came out and took control of the entire situation professionally, and by that, I mean they put Molly through the table.
Damn.
And that's not all. This show heavily featured matches between the stars of the Alliance and WWE. We had Booker T defending his WCW World title against Chris Jericho, and while the match wasn't a 20-minute classic, the two stars were in their prime and had a strong match against each other. This is also the time the tag team division was on fire because of the 3 tag teams that revolutionized the division. We had the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. And on the show, the Hardy Boys and the Dudleys once again put a short yet great television tag team match, further proving why they were doing some of the best work all year. In addition to this, Kurt Angle was also in action against Raven in a decent singles match. However, it was clear the heart of the show was built around one individual and one individual alone. That was Stone Cold Steve Austin. If there's one superstar that Vince has always been at war at on television, it's Steve Austin. Steve, for the better part of his WWE run, has always been anti-corporate and is one of the few wrestlers who never sucked up to Vince at all. This is why seeing Vince beg Steve Austin to join Team WWE was pure gold. During the episode, we saw that Steve was contemplating joining Team WWE to help them take out WCW and ECW at the upcoming InVasion pay-per-view. And during the storyline, Steve was acting less hostile towards Vince, and Vince knew in order to take out the alliance, he would need to recruit Steve Austin that put him through hell in the past. Only that version of Stone Cold will be able to take out the likes of the Dudleys, Rhino, Booker T, and Diamond Dallas Page. As the InVasion event was getting a bit closer, Team WWE had no clear leader as Austin was still undecided. Kurt Angle offered to step up in this episode of Raw, providing a hilarious segment for the viewers as usual.
Sir, I'm ready to be your leader. Nah, that ain't gonna work. Mr. McMahon, I humbly accept your offer as leader for Team WWF.
What are you doing in my office?
I'm waiting for you.
Where's Stone Cold?
Not only is Stone Cold not here, but he's at some local bar drinking. Don't you worry about that, because I'm here to lead Team WWF into InVasion.
Thank you very much. What's the name of the bar? Friendly Tap. That's the name of it.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll be back in a few minutes. I gotta go find Stone Cold, okay?
Before we got to the main event of the show, Steve will be seen throughout the episode at the Friendly Tap bar, still making up his mind whether he wanted to join Vince's little group. And you know something's up when a dude like Steve Austin sits down and starts to think for a couple of hours. Vince then appeared at the bar in front of Steve and asked him for a clear answer on whether or not he'll be joining Team WWE. But again, Steve didn't answer, and it seemed as though the show would end on a major cliffhanger. So the main event was set between the team of Diamond Dallas Page and Rhino against the Brothers of Destruction. The match was basically a 4-minute brawl that saw all 4 men hitting big power moves and ended when the guys of the Alliance interfered and started pounding on the Brothers of Destruction. Team WWE wrestlers came to the rescue, but the Alliance was way too much for them, and JR was gold on commentary, letting the audience know what a dire situation this was, and for the next 2 to 3 minutes we saw our beloved superstars struggling to keep up. This is where the saving grace of Team WWE arrived in quite possibly one of the best moments in WWE history. Stone Cold arrived in the parking lot of the building and began beating up on WCW and ECW superstars, while we could see images of WWE guys like Kane, Undertaker and Kurt Angle getting beat on in the ring as they were still being overwhelmed. And the camera was excellent. It was flicking between Austin making his way through the backstage and the action in the ring. And just like an orchestra builds to a crescendo, the crowds lost their minds when Steve Austin's music played.
This right here is my favorite thing.
The pop was enormous, and nobody in the history of the company ever gets cheers like Steve. When Austin entered the ring and began giving stunners to the WCW and ECW guys, the crowd was loving every second of it as Steve was dropping bodies after bodies.
Him, her, him.
And if it wasn't already clear, Steve had joined Team WWE and will be battling Team Alliance at the InVasion event that weekend. To put it simply, it was one of the best Raw shows ever, if not the best go home episode. And the commentary, the crowd, and the atmosphere was honestly
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
This is the kind of go-home wrestling shows that we should be getting today, but sadly we don't. This episode made you excited for the event that was coming up on Sunday, which is the reason why the InVasion was one of the most successful pay-per-views of all time. With a reported buy rate of 775,000, this event has the biggest buy rates of any non-WrestleMania pay-per-view in WWE history. This episode of Raw is the epitome of furthering a storyline without dragging it out by any means. And when you center the storyline on the biggest star in the company, that's when you know you've hit a home run. The entire show focused on whether or not Steve would join Vince's team, and it never felt predictable. Considering the hell that Steve and Vince gave each other in the past, you couldn't tell how the show would end. And when the show ends with one of the biggest pops and excellent brawl, you know your time wasn't wasted as the audience. And you could see why the InVasion pay-per-view was so successful because of this episode. So while some fans believe WWE blew their load too early, as the InVasion/Alliance storyline only ran from March to November 2001, it meant the next night after the pay-per-view, Austin claimed that he would join the alliance because they appreciated him. He cited Vince hugging Angle and calling The Rock on the phone as signs that Vince did not appreciate Austin, and accused McMahon of grooming Angle to be the next WWE champion. If you enjoyed the video today, make sure to subscribe and give it a like, and if you want us to cover Stone Cold within the alliance, let us know in the comment section below. And here, check out this video we made earlier of John Cena versus The Rock.